Hello everyone and welcome to our Ash Wednesday service. It's the 2nd of March. Ash Wednesday, it's the beginning of Lent. It really is a new season in the church calendar. You know, we've been talking about it being Epiphany now for weeks. You know, these moments of aha and inspiration. And this is a different season altogether. This is a season of quiet reflection. It's thoughtful, it's contemplative. It's like a spring cleaning for the soul. Yeah. Is there anything that we can do to give us a lift in our spiritual lives? Because it seems like it's really easy to get distracted and disengaged and even lonely in your faith, isn't it? Yeah, Jesus would say there are some things that are very helpful. There are some things that you can actually do to help put you back on track. And in the passage tonight, he gives us 3 spiritual practices that can help put us back on track when we lose our way. The reading is from Matthew chapter 6. A reading from Matthew chapter 6. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So, whenever you give alms, do not sound the trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they will be seen by others. But truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. When you pray, go into your room and shut the door, and pray to your Father who's in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you're praying, don't heap up empty phrases such as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Pray then this way: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. And whenever you fast, don't look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces as to show others that they're fasting. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others, but by your Father who is in heaven, and sees in secret. He will reward you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Well, the text that we just heard, Jesus gives 3 spiritual practices that strengthen us. And tonight I'm only going to be looking at one of these practices, and I'm going to be looking at fasting. And the reason that I'm going to be looking at fasting is because it just struck me, particularly as I was reading through this text. We spend so much time, like for example yesterday on Sunday, we spent so much time talking about the renewal of our minds and how to pay attention to what we're thinking about. And so, I mean, a lot of our emphasis is on our minds, which of course is good, right? That's what St. Paul wrote to his congregation, you know, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. But it's like we completely forget our bodies. It is the strangest thing that we can fill, our faith is just all up here. And it just gets stuck in this head center of intelligence, and hopefully moves down here. But to get to actual body, that's something different. That's something different. And it's certainly something that has been really neglected in much of Christianity. Not all of Christianity, but actually I was thinking all the major faith religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, they all have fasting as a part of their practices, not just these three. Buddhism, Hinduism, I mean, so many religions throughout the entire, world have had bodily practices, something you do with your body that affects your emotional life and your spiritual life. So that's where we're going. That's why I kind of got interested in this, because I thought, wow, I spent so much time thinking about faith, but how much does it actually, impact me physically? So Ash Wednesday, I was thinking about Ash Wednesday. I really didn't know very much about Ash Wednesday at all for the first 30 years of my life. I think when I got to seminary that I started to think about it more. I remember growing up in Scotland, I did see people go around with smudges of something on their forehead, and I knew it was something to do with being Catholic, but other than that, in Scotland at that time, I had really no idea what Ash Wednesday was. But I do remember there was one girl that would go around with a smudge on her forehead, and I think, what is that about? And my friends would say, oh, she's Catholic, and that's what the Catholics do. But other than that, being part of the Presbyterian tradition, had no clue what it was. And there isn't actually any mention of Ash Wednesday in the scripture. This is sort of a later thing that the young church, the new church, developed. I mean, I think pretty early on they figured out that it's awfully easy to get, distracted. Maybe we should set aside some time in the year where we can reflect and ponder and think if we're on track. And so Ash Wednesday didn't really come about until about 300 years after the resurrection. And by that time, when the believers were coming into the church and being baptized, they would have a 40-day preparation period before Easter. And it would really be like an in-depth course on what does it mean to follow Christ. And they would have that preparation time for 40 days. And then on Easter, they would be baptized. That's sort of, how this whole idea of Lent came about. It comes from the Anglo-Saxon word, which means springtime. So whatever else Lent is, the idea is that it's supposed to be a springtime for the soul. And of course, you know that spring is all about new birth and growth. You walk outside just now, it's green, it's lush, the flowers are out, it's growing. So when we're talking about Lent or practicing a Lent discipline, it's like, what is going to help me green my soul? What is going to help me grow? What can help me in that area? What can bring new life to that area? By the way, we're never giving up anything for God. God doesn't need anything from us. We need God. God doesn't need us. So we're never giving stuff up for God. So Jesus says, interesting thing, he says, when you fast, don't make a big fuss about it. It's between you and God. He doesn't say, verse 16, he doesn't say, I think it's a really good idea that you fast. This is going to benefit you. He doesn't say, okay, I'm giving you a commandment. I want you all to fast because this is going to help you. His first listeners, the first people that he spoke to, already fasted. They already knew the benefits of fasting. Jesus fasted, his disciples fasted, all the early Jewish people fasted. It was just a done thing. So he says in this text, when you fast, don't make a big fuss about it. It's between you and God. You don't need to be telling people or making a big show. This is something private. It's like prayer. It's private. It's like generous acts. You don't give to somebody and then make a big fuss about it, right? You're not generous and then tell the world. Kind of defeats the purpose, right? It's the same way with fasting. Now, many times in the past, when I've given a teaching on fasting, I immediately start to say, no, I always say this, it doesn't have to be about food. We can fast from many, many different things. We can fast from our attitudes. We can fast from criticism. We can fast from prejudice. And then I go on and on and on. And I notice that what happens when I do that is again, our spiritual practices move from the body into the head. It's so fascinating. As soon as you start to say, no, it doesn't have to just be about food. It doesn't have to be about something you consume. It could be fasting from anger. Or I've also in the past spoken about you can take up something for Lent. You don't have to give up anything. You can take on a practice. And all these things are fine. None of them are wrong. But I did notice how in the past I have neglected speaking about the impact our physical bodies have on our spirit and our emotions. I mean, we're all connected, right? We're all connected. So I do want us to consider tonight this whole idea of fasting and choosing something that somehow affects us physically. The whole idea of fasting, of course, is about self-control. The whole idea about fasting is does that thing control you or do you control it? Often with physical things, simple things like food, coffee, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. It's very easy for us to start to not be willing to change anything or give it up, because that once pleasurable thing, like a nice cup of coffee, becomes a needed thing. And we've just gone from having something be pleasurable and helpful to, I can't do anything without this, whatever it would be, food-wise, what we're taking in. So I think one of the things that, the reason that Jesus speaks about fasting or food is because it tends to have a hold on us. And it has a lot more hold on us than we would like to think sometimes. I have a visual illustration. I hardly ever have these things, but for those of you who are visual, this is a little a little illustration on what Lent's about in a way. So I have here a flute. See if I can get a tone for you. Let's see. This is kind of a cool sound. Yeah, I've got the sound. Now, I got the sound because it's hollowed out, right? So the flute, the wood, the stick basically, is empty. So with this, what's my other little illustration here? It's just a stick. There's no way, it's not been hollowed out, it's not empty, there's no way I'm going to get any sound out of this. So the idea is that when the stick is hollowed out, that's when the music comes. And the illustration is sort of this whole idea, and there's many different ways of talking about this in our tradition, our spiritual tradition. But it's the whole idea of, kind of reminds me of the Philippians kenosis chapter, which is about emptying yourself. There's something beneficial about emptying yourself or releasing something. There's something beneficial about exercising an intentional, thoughtful choosing. I'm going to empty myself of this for this time. Lent is an opportunity to really empty yourself of something that has control over you. Now, oh my goodness, I was thinking about the things that have control over us. There are so many things. I mean, there's so many things that we would be better off without, or at least limiting in some way, because our culture is a little bit different than Jesus, right? I mean, we have so many things that can you imagine not having your phone for 40 days? I mean, most of us couldn't function. I mean, there's so many things in our culture that dominate us. But I think there's something about this idea of food. It's very, very basic, or a particular food. Something that we enjoy a lot or eat a lot or need a lot. I mean, I think it's connected with need. I think it's connected with dependency, or I think it's connected with security. Because when you're emptying yourself of that, you're feeling some sort of discomfort, right? Well, I think if you want to really get into the realm of fasting, I mean, I think what it's going to show you is, wow, I'm not really as free as I thought I was. I don't know if I can do this. So initially it might be quite alarming. You might think, there's nothing to that. That's just a lot of nonsense. That's something like they did in the old days. But I think the energy behind the whole idea of fasting is worthwhile pondering. You know, our faith is mind and heart and body, and so much of our faith practice today, in the Lutheran Church anyway, is all up here. I noticed a big difference on Sunday, actually, when we started to sing, how immediately the focus drops. When you really sing, you know, your focus, you're not really in your head anymore. You drop down into your body. That's a different kind of intelligence, isn't it? Body intelligence. I mean, I think if we learned how to listen to our bodies more, especially those of us that are stuck up here all the time, or here, you know, feeling everybody's feelings, I think that we could learn a lot. So fasting gets at certainly the body, the physical structure. It's certainly a time where we can thoughtfully make a choice. You know what? Maybe there's something to this. I mean, if Jesus is assuming that we fast, isn't it worthwhile considering it? If Jesus is actually saying this, I mean, this isn't some modern idea, although I think the modern equivalent of fasting is cleansing and detoxing. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to have a spiritual component to it, but if you walk down the aisle of any whole food store, you're going to see masses of amounts of all sorts of things that help you, with a cleanse or help you detox. And it's basically targeting your body to help you ultimately, not just with your body, but also with the rest of your life, like with your emotional life. It's the same thing with yoga. Why do people find yoga helpful? It's not just stretching, although that's very good. It's getting your body in place to move and to stretch, but it's also affecting your mind, which affects your heart, which affects your emotions. The whole thing is connected, in other words. So I'm suggesting that the reason that Jesus assumed that we would continue fasting and that is because it's beneficial. Not because God needs us to do something. It's not for God. It's for us. There's something about the way that we are put together that we can easily become addicted to things that we eat and drink. I mean, we can be addicted to so many things, it's endless, but let's just focus on the food thing just now, food and drink just now, because since it's Ash Wednesday. Jesus knew, this is the way that people are worldwide. If we have something, we usually want more. It's hard for us to get any kind of balance. And yet, as part of our spiritual lives, what is fascinating is, if you bring change to one area of your life, like for example, say a simple thing, like an intentional fasting of a particular food or a meal or however you want to do it for the next 40 days. There's something about if you get empowered in one area, it trickles down into other areas. How that works, why that works, I don't know. But I do know that there's something about moving ahead in one area and having a little bit of success in one area sort of empowers you and strengthens you on the inside. Your inner self, it strengthens you. So I want to encourage you with that this Lent. This is Ash Wednesday. It's the beginning of the 40-day period. If you can last for 5 days and you mess up on the 6th day, I would suggest you start again on the 7th. Use it as just a time to learn something about yourself. I think there's something in this. If Jesus is assuming that we do it, and if he fasted and if his disciples fasted, I think we can learn from this in some way. I think if we go in, even if you're like me, you're not awfully sure about it, you don't necessarily understand it all, I think even just to go in with an open mind and say, okay, I'm dedicating this time. For the next 40 days, I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to try it. And I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to see what God reveals, what God shows me. And just see what happens. It's like, just be curious about it. It's not a law, it's not a command, you don't have to do it. But I think it would be worthwhile to consider it, to ponder it, and to be curious about it. Because if Jesus is speaking about it, there's a good reason for that. Even if we don't understand it, even if we haven't experienced it, it'd be worthwhile to be very intentional over this next 40-day period. So there's the prayer. It's like, what is coming to you at this moment? What is surfacing that you think, that might be a good idea for me to empty myself of that. Now, you might want to empty yourself of it forever, or you might want to empty yourself for a time. It doesn't, that part isn't as important. What's important, I think, is starting it, at least starting the practice. But is there anything that is coming up? You think of this little flute that's emptied. It's like, is there something to this fasting? Is there something that I could empty my life of, my body of really, for the next 40 days to see what happens? To see what happens. Something to ponder, something to consider this Lent. Amen.
Jesus is living, Jesus is here. Jesus, my Lord, come closer to me. Jesus, our Savior, dying for me and rising to save God's people. Jesus is living, Jesus is here. Jesus, my Lord, come closer to me. Jesus, our Savior, dying for me and rising to save God's people. Stretch out your hand, oh Lord, comfort me. Lead me your way in life and truth. Fill me with living water. Jesus is living, Jesus is here. Jesus, my Lord, come closer to me. Jesus, our Savior.